How Buddhism heals fear. Have you ever laid awake at night, staring at the ceiling, heart racing, mind spinning, and a weight pressing down on your chest that you can't quite name? You've got a job, you're doing okay. From the outside, it looks like your life is working, but inside, you're haunted by what might happen, by what has happened, or worse, by things you can't even define. This is fear, but not the sharp fear that comes from danger. This is a slow, creeping fear. Like a fog that fills your lungs and clouds your thoughts, the kind that quietly builds walls around your spirit, and the strangest thing is, no one else can see it. You smile. You work. You laugh, but deep down, you are a prisoner, and the worst part, you don't even know how you got here. There's a story in Buddhist tradition. A monk once asked the Buddha, "What is the greatest illness of the human heart?" And the Buddha replied, "Fear, because fear keeps us from seeing things as they truly are." Fear isn't just an emotion, it's a veil, a filter that distorts our vision, shapes our decisions, and silently chains us to suffering. It's the fear of not being enough, the fear of losing control, the fear of death, of rejection, of not being loved, of being alone. But here's the truth the Buddha discovered under the Bodhi tree: fear isn't something we must fight, it's something we must understand. In this journey, you won't learn how to run from fear, you'll learn how to look it in the eye. You won't be taught to destroy it, but to gently hold it, to breathe with it, and to walk with it as a teacher, because the moment you begin to understand fear, is the moment it begins to lose its power. So take a breath. You're not alone, you've already taken the first step, turning toward what hurts, with curiosity and courage. This is the path of freedom, not freedom from fear, but freedom within fear. Let's begin. What if I told you that fear isn't the enemy, that fear is not a flaw to be fixed, but a signal, a sacred messenger from the depths of your own mind? In the teachings of the Buddha, fear is not seen as evil, it's not something to be hated, buried, or denied. It is a natural part of the human condition, a wave that rises from the ocean of our attachment, and like all waves, it will pass. Fear arises because we cling. We crave certainty, control, identity. We grasp onto what we love. Our families, our careers, our image, our youth, and fear begins to form the moment we realize we could lose it all. This is why the Buddha taught, where there is attachment, there is fear. In fact, in the Dhammapada, he says, from attachment arises grief. From attachment arises fear. He who is free from attachment knows neither grief nor fear. Let that sink in for a moment. Fear is not random, it's not irrational, it is born from the roots of our own minds, from desire, from ignorance, from the illusion that we can hold on to things forever. Imagine someone standing on the edge of a cliff, clinging tightly to a rope. They're terrified of falling, but what they don't realize is that the cliff isn't real, the drop isn't real, and the rope they cling to is just fear itself. The Buddha called this illusion Maya, the veil of misperception we live behind. We fear because we don't see clearly. We believe the impermanent is permanent, the empty is substantial, the self is real. But when we begin to see through this illusion, something incredible happens. Fear no longer owns us. There's a story from the life of the Buddha. One night, as he sat in meditation under the Bodhi tree, he was visited by Mara, the tempter, the embodiment of fear, doubt, and desire. Mara hurled storms at him. He sent visions of horror. He tried to shake the Buddha from his seat. But the Buddha simply watched. He didn't resist, he didn't run, he didn't fight. He placed one hand gently on the earth and said, "I see you, Mara." That's all. Recognition. Awareness, no judgment. No resistance, and Mara vanished. This is the secret the Buddha left for us. You cannot defeat fear by force. You overcome it by seeing it clearly, by sitting with it, breathing with it, naming it, and recognizing where it comes from. Fear is not the darkness, it's the doorway. And once you learn how to walk through that doorway, you begin to understand a new kind of courage, one that comes not from the absence of fear, but from the presence of wisdom. So ask yourself gently, what am I clinging to that makes me so afraid? The answer may hurt, but it also holds your freedom. What if the very thing you're protecting doesn't actually exist, not your body, not your memories, not even your name, but the you, the self you believe you are, that collection of fears, hopes, preferences, and pain, that voice inside your head that whispers, "This is me. This is who I am." What if it's all just a mirage? According to Buddhist teachings, this self, this I, is not a solid, unchanging entity, it's more like a story we tell ourselves every single day. But here's the catch, we're so attached to that story, we will do anything to protect it. We fear humiliation because it threatens our identity, we fear change because it shatters our story. We fear loss because we think we own something, we fear death because we think it's the end of us. But who is this me we're defending? The Buddha taught the doctrine of anatta, non-self. He said, there is no unchanging, permanent self within us. What we call self is just a collection of 5 aggregates: body, sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. And these, they're all changing, all the time, just like clouds in the sky. So when we cling to this false self, when we try to make it permanent, we create fear, because deep inside, we know, nothing we hold on to is secure, and that terrifies us. There's a Zen koan that asks, without relying on your name, your history, your thoughts, who are you? Sit with that for a moment. When the story drops away, when the mask falls, when the inner narrator goes silent, what's left? Pure awareness, spaciousness, freedom. There's a story of a student who came to a Zen master and said, "Master, I am afraid of dying." The master replied, "Then find the one who dies." The student searched within himself for years, for this one who fears, who dies, who clings, but he could never find it. Eventually, he returned and said, "Master, I have searched everywhere, but I cannot find the one who dies." And the master smiled, "Then you are free." This is the truth the Buddha points us to. We are not our thoughts, not our fears, not our story. When we stop clinging to identity, fear begins to dissolve, not because we've defeated it, but because the thing it was protecting was never real. The illusion of self is the root of our suffering, but it is also the beginning of our liberation, because when you no longer have to defend a fixed self, you can finally rest, finally breathe, finally live. There's a storm inside you, winds of panic, clouds of doubt, thunderclaps of anxiety. You try to outrun it, to distract yourself, to bury it beneath noise, work, screens, or smiles, but the storm keeps finding you, and that's where the Buddha gives us the most powerful instruction of all: sit. Not run, not fix, not fight, just sit. Meditation, in Buddhism, is not escape, it is a courageous return to the exact place where fear is born. It's not about emptying the mind, but filling it with presence. It's not about ignoring fear, but making space for it to be seen, clearly, compassionately, and something miraculous happens, when you sit still enough, long enough, honestly enough, the fear begins to speak. It tells you, "I'm here because you care. I'm here because you don't want to lose what matters. I'm here because something inside you is still unfinished." Fear is not your enemy, it's your invitation. It's like a crying child in the dark. Most people either scream at it, or try to silence it quickly, but the Buddha, he would pick it up, hold it, and simply listen. The breath becomes the anchor. Inhale, "I see you, fear." Exhale, "You are allowed to be here." Inhale, "I do not resist you." Exhale, "I will not become you." In the practice of Vipassana, insight meditation, we do not run away from fear, we turn toward it. We watch the heart pound, we feel the heat rise, we observe the mind spin stories, and yet, we don't move, we sit, not as victims, but as witnesses. Over time, this stillness becomes strength, and the storm begins to shift. We realize, we are not the fear, we are the space holding the fear, a vast, open awareness, untouched by the storm, as Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh says. Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky, conscious breathing is my anchor. And when we breathe consciously through fear, we reclaim something sacred, not control, but clarity, not power over the world, but freedom from its grip on our nervous system. We stop reacting, we start responding, the fear loses its teeth, not because it disappears, but because we no longer feed it. So the next time fear visits you, in the middle of the night, or right before a big decision, or when you feel utterly alone, try not to chase it away. Sit, breathe, welcome it like a guest, and in that sacred pause, you may just discover, peace is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to stay, even when fear arrives. What are you holding on to, so tightly, that your hands are shaking? Is it the need to be liked, the desire to succeed, the fear of being alone, or the belief that you must always be in control? Whatever it is, that's where fear hides, because fear always has a home, in attachment. Buddhism teaches that fear is not born out of thin air, it grows in the soil of grasping. We cling to what we love, we grasp for what we desire. We hold on to our identities, our stories, our expectations, as if they were lifeboats, but they're not lifeboats, they're anchors, and the deeper we hold, the more we sink. The Buddha called this upadana, clinging. He taught that all suffering comes from attachment. And at the center of attachment is fear, fear of loss, fear of impermanence, fear that if we let go, we will become nothing. But here's the paradox, the moment we truly let go, we become free, not empty, but spacious, not less, but more whole than ever. Imagine holding a fistful of sand, the tighter you grip, the more slips through your fingers. Letting go doesn't mean you lose everything. It means you stop strangling everything. Letting go means you stop trying to control what's uncontrollable. You stop expecting the world to obey your plans. You stop demanding permanence in a world of constant change. And what's left when you let go? Peace, not a dramatic fireworks moment, but a gentle exhale, a sense of finally putting something down that you didn't know was so heavy, like the monk who carries a bowl, light and empty, and smiles at the sky, because his hands are free. Thich Nhat Hanh said it beautifully, letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart, we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free. So, we begin to let go, not all at once, not perfectly, but gently. We let go of the need to be right, the craving to be understood, the compulsion to win, the fear of falling apart. And we begin to trust that we are held by something deeper than our fears. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care, it means you care deeply, without needing to control. It means you love without clinging, you live without needing a guarantee, you walk forward, even when you don't know what's coming, because fear only rules us when we refuse to release. And so we begin to practice the art of letting go, not as a one-time decision, but as a daily return, like the tree lets go of its leaves, like the river lets go of each drop, like the breath comes in and then flows out. That is freedom. The Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, in silence, for days, for nights, until he saw the truth that would change the world forever, the truth that, at its core, is the end of fear. And it all begins with a simple realization: suffering is. The Buddha's first teaching was not just about the nature of fear, but about the nature of life itself. In his awakening, he discovered what he called the Four Noble Truths, the foundation of all Buddhist wisdom. These four truths are not mere concepts, they are the map to freedom from fear, to peace beyond the storm. 1. The truth of suffering, dukkha. The first truth is not what we think it is not a negative truth. It's a compassionate truth. The Buddha didn't say life is all suffering, he said life contains suffering, it's woven into the fabric of existence. But here's the catch, the suffering he spoke of is not just external, it's internal. It's in the tension we feel when we resist reality. It's in the moments when we grasp, when we hold on tight to things that are always changing. This suffering, dukkha, is not something to fear. It's something to understand. It's the painful knowledge that things are impermanent, that we are impermanent, and that we cannot control everything. But once you see this, once you truly understand the nature of suffering, you start to release the need to escape it. You stop running from it, because you know, suffering will come, and suffering will go. 2. The truth of the cause of suffering, samadaya. The second truth reveals the root of suffering, the cause of our fear. The Buddha called it attachment, our constant craving, our compulsive grasping at things. We crave approval, we crave security, we crave permanence, we crave control. But here's the irony: the more we crave, the more we suffer, the more we cling to things, the more we fear losing them, the more we chase desires, the more we fear never reaching them. This endless cycle of craving is the cause of all suffering, and this is where fear grows, in attachment, in the belief that something, anything, is ours. Our success, our status, our relationships, our time. But what if nothing is ours? What if we could simply let go? What if we could live in the flow, trusting that everything we need will appear when we stop forcing it? 3. The truth of the end of suffering, Nirodha. The third truth offers the most profound insight: suffering can end. It's not a distant ideal, it's not a promise we can only dream of, it's the possibility available to us right now. The end of suffering happens when we stop chasing, when we stop clinging, when we embrace the truth that everything changes, that everything is impermanent, that we are enough, just as we are. This is what the Buddha called nirvana, the end of craving, the end of fear. But nirvana is not some far-off heaven. It's a state of being, a way of living without fear. 4. The truth of the path to the end of suffering, Magga. The fourth truth is the path itself, the path to the end of suffering, the path of liberation from fear, and this path is the Noble Eightfold Path. A guide to living mindfully, ethically, and with wisdom. It's not a set of rigid rules, it's a practice, a way of life. The Eightfold Path teaches us right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Each step on this path is a step toward freedom. Each step dissolves the chains of fear, one link at a time. The Four Noble Truths are not just philosophical ideas, they are the antidote to fear. When you see that suffering is part of life, you stop running from it. When you understand that attachment is the cause of suffering, you begin to let go. When you realize that suffering can end, you start living with peace. And when you walk the Eightfold Path, you step into fearlessness. Fear doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls you. The Buddha didn't promise a life without challenges, but he did show us a way to face those challenges, without fear. At the heart of all Buddhist practice, there is one thing that stands above all. It's the simplest thing, and the most radical. It is love, it is compassion, it is metta, the practice of loving kindness. And here lies the most powerful secret of all: compassion destroys fear. Fear is born from the belief in separation. We feel afraid because we believe we are isolated. We fear what we don't understand. We fear what we can't control, and, ultimately, we fear that we are alone. But when we open our hearts, when we let the light of compassion shine, we realize that we are not separate, we are not alone, we are all interconnected. The Buddha taught that compassion is the antidote to suffering. And suffering, as we know, is the birthplace of fear. Compassion cuts through the illusion of separation. It softens the walls we've built around our hearts. It opens us to the truth that we are all one. It starts with ourselves. Before we can truly love others, we must learn to love ourselves, not in an egoic, self-centered way, but in the deep recognition that we are worthy of love, just as we are. How many times have we feared that we are not enough? How often have we rejected parts of ourselves, afraid of our own flaws, our mistakes, our darkness? But here's the truth: you are enough. Compassion for yourself means embracing your imperfections. It means releasing the fear that you must be perfect, and allowing yourself to be whole. It's the deep acceptance that you are not separate from the rest of the world. You are part of it, and you are worthy of love, just as you are. Once we understand compassion for ourselves, it naturally flows out to others. Every person you meet is a reflection of your own heart. When you look into the eyes of another, you are looking into the eyes of a fellow soul, a soul that experiences joy, sorrow, pain, and fear, just like you. The Buddha said, "May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from fear. May all beings live with ease." Imagine living in a world where we saw each other with the eyes of compassion, a world where we recognize the shared humanity in each person we meet, a world where we extend kindness, even when we don't fully understand, where we forgive, not because it's easy, but because it's freeing. This is the power of compassion. When we practice compassion toward ourselves and others, we begin to unravel fear. Fear thrives in isolation, but compassion is the language of connection. It's the force that transcends all boundaries. whether between cultures, genders, races, or even ideologies. Compassion allows us to see past the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that divide us. It helps us remember that beneath the surface, we are all seeking the same thing: love, peace, understanding. And here's the most radical truth: compassion is not just about feeling for others, it's about acting. It's about taking right action in the world, whether through a kind word, a helping hand, or simply a listening ear. The most powerful way to dispel fear is to act with compassion. Even in the face of fear, you can choose kindness. Even in the face of anger, you can choose patience. Even in the face of judgment, you can choose acceptance. Because every act of compassion creates a ripple. It sends out waves of healing into the world, and with every ripple, fear dissolves. In your own life, you can begin right now. You don't need to wait for a special occasion. You don't need a grand gesture. All you need is your willingness to act. So, here's the invitation. Start with yourself. Practice loving kindness for your own heart. Forgive yourself. Embrace your imperfections. And then, let that love radiate out. If you felt the stirrings of compassion in your heart, it's time to take action. Because true transformation comes when we live from this space. So, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, how can I bring more compassion into my life today? Who can I extend a kind word to? Who can I forgive, including myself? And, most importantly, what can I do to release the fear that no longer serves me? If you feel called to dive deeper into the transformative power of Buddhist teachings, subscribe to our channel and join this journey of healing, growth, and freedom from fear. We have so much more to share. We have a path to walk together. Like, share, and comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of wisdom and healing. May you be free from fear, and live in peace. Namaste.